Welcome back to this week's OIS podcast. Today, our host, Dr. Paul Karpecki, chats with surgeon-turned-innovator Dr. Michael Gertner. He developed an FDA-cleared neurostimulation device that brings dry eye patients to tears, literally. With that, turning it over to you, Paul.
Hello, and welcome to the OIS podcast. I'm Dr. Paul Karpecki, one of the hosts for these podcasts, and I'm honored today to have a great individual that we're going to interview that has come up with a very innovative technology that's helping a ton of dry eye patients, but it's fairly new, I bet, to a lot of you. And today's guest is Dr. Mike Gertner. Mike, nice to have you here.
Oh, thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me today.
We're honored to. I think our listeners are going to be fascinated by this because although we know a little bit about neurostimulation and the timing's really good about learning more about it right now, I think that there are going to be a number of people that are not aware of Olympic Ophthalmics or the iTEAR 100 and really want to kind of know more about it. But I want to start by getting to know you a little bit for our attendees, our audience. And if you don't mind, Mike, can you walk us through your personal background, like where you grew up? So you have siblings, family life, a little bit about how you even got into medicine. And I think you were a general surgeon for a while. And did you practice that? And then we'll get into how you went to the entrepreneurial side afterwards.
Sure. So I was born in New York City and grew up in a town called West Long Branch, New Jersey. It's about a mile from the beach. It's claim to fame. It was the estate of Woodrow Wilson. It also became Monmouth University. There's lots of great Revolutionary War history and George Washington, for example, in the Battle of Monmouth. There's lots of great stuff there. I have a younger brother, a year and a half younger. He lives in Fredericksburg, Virginia. He's a nephrologist, and I have a sister who lives in Paris, and she's a physicist there. Personally, I have 5 kids. 3 are my own, and 2 are stepchildren. They range in age from 7. That's my son, 10, 12, and then I have 2 older kids as well, 19 and 20, 18 and 20, I should say. I live in Menlo Park, California now, and also part-time in Issaquah, Washington, where the company's based and where my wife lives.
Awesome. That's amazing. It's amazing with 5 children, you have time to also, be the CEO and lead a company at this stage, plus all the FDA development. I'm always amazed by people who can accomplish so much.
And that's part and parcel why I started out in general surgery. I did practice for a number of years. I finished my residency in 2004 at UCSF, and then practiced in the Bay Area here at a number of places, including Santa Clara Valley Medical Center, which is the trauma center in San Jose. And then, but all along, I've been inventing and licensing a lot of products to different companies, and so it was a natural transition. It wasn't really a jump. But my family is really the reason why I ended up moving towards product development, entrepreneurship, and leaving general surgery. It was too difficult to do all that as well as be a general surgeon.
Yeah, it's a tasking role. I mean, at all hours, all times. It really isn't any set schedule. I can't imagine. And so really a great decision because you have a bigger picture in mind in terms of family, and then also in terms of your talents and your ability. Not everybody can make that leap from a surgeon or a physician into entrepreneurship. So for you, it was a natural shift, or did you have to learn stuff? Did you go through any sort of business stuff, or was this just inherent in your passion to begin with?
Yeah, so it's more or less natural. I started out before medical school. I was a engineer, a bachelor's and master's degree in mechanical engineering, and so I was always sort of a tinkerer, always interested in the inventive process, innovation. There were much less formal pathways back then for that type of thing. So I sort of did have to learn a lot on my own and sort of navigate the course. I probably do things a little bit differently now. With all, there's a lot more infrastructure and things set up for physicians that want to become inventors and vice versa. So, but anyway, so there was a lot to sort of navigate through, but a lot of it was natural. And then also moving out to the Bay Area for my residency at UCSF, that obviously had a big impact and facilitated a lot of this
How did the transition go from, you can understand being a general surgeon, you tinker with a lot of things, a lot of developments there, but then you went into the eye care field, which is a very different field.
Yeah.
Was that just right place, the right time? Was this something in neurostimulation you'd already been looking at? How did that transition occur?
Yeah, good question. So after my residency, I came down to the area here, Palo Alto, Menlo Park. I was working with Tom Crummell, who's a pediatric surgeon, who's the chief of surgery at Stanford. We sort of brainstormed a program called Surgical Innovation Program to help folks like myself, actually, that are physicians that want to understand the innovation process, product development process. We started a program called the Surgical Innovation Program. But through that, I met a lot of people, a lot of different doctors at Stanford that were interested in different types of products. And ophthalmology happens to be obviously a very innovative field. And so there are a lot of ophthalmologists that I came across and spoke to. And so that's sort of how I learned a lot about ophthalmology. In fact, if I had to do it again, I might have gone into ophthalmology as opposed to general surgery, just because of all the great innovation that's happening, the mindset of a lot of doctors.
So moving from general surgery, which certainly, a big leap alone, and I know you tinkered in that area, came with a lot of things, were already fairly entrepreneurial and innovative, given, your background in that. But then to get to the field of ophthalmology, it's another leap in of itself. How did that come about, Mike?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Paul. So after my residency at UCSF, I came down to the Bay Area, down to the peninsula in the Bay Area, and was working as a general surgeon, and was also working with Tom Crummell, who was the chief of surgery at Stanford, pediatric surgeon, great pediatric surgeon, and innovator himself. And we brainstormed on a program called the Surgical Innovation Program, where we could bring in doctors and train them in the process. So that they didn't have to have all the sort of stumbles and roadblocks that I encountered. And through that, I met a lot of different doctors at Stanford and in the area who were interested in innovation. And a lot of those doctors happen to be ophthalmologists. And ophthalmology, it's just such an innovative field. There's medicine, there's surgery. You're doing great things for patients. In fact, if I had to do it again, I might even have chosen ophthalmology as a profession, just because of all the varied aspects. It's a great mindset of the doctors that are involved in it, and it's kind of a very focused field. But in any case, that's how I wound up in ophthalmology. Neurostimulation, on the other hand, is pervasive outside of ophthalmology, everywhere: cardiovascular, orthopedics, and so I knew a lot about those different types of technologies and clinical applications. And so it was very interesting to me to apply it into ophthalmology. And when I saw some of the work going on with TrueTear, and I also dry eye sufferer myself, it really seemed like a great area to pursue.
Absolutely. It's fascinating how we do get into areas we have some inclination to somehow, maybe subconsciously, we move into conditions we have. But I love that background. So you touched on a little bit, TrueTear had been the first neurostimulation technology to enter the field of ophthalmology and that whole eye care. And it was, in patients that was used, it worked extremely well. I still have patients who, for a while, had asked for it. Unfortunately, we were blessed to have, the FDA approval of the iTEAR 100 from your company, Olympic Ophthalmics. Hey, why don't you explain a little bit for those who aren't familiar with it of how the iTEAR 100 works compared to, say, original TrueTear and its role in dry eye disease?
So I have dry eye. I used TrueTear and I liked it. I liked the way my eyes felt afterward, and I was disappointed to hear that it might be being taken off the market. And so at that point, I started to look for a different type of, way to do the same type of stimulation, but obviously to get around the patents or coexist with the patents of Allergan, and then also perhaps make it a little bit less invasive. So that was sort of the impetus to move forward into a neurostimulation product myself. And I will circle back on one topic here that made me want to be like kind of the first line in product development, and that is this concept where a company like Allergan buys a product from an innovative company before that, and then they don't develop it. That happened a couple of times to me, including one time with Allergan as well, for an obesity product. And so that sort of led me to want to develop products myself and commercialize them myself so they'd actually get to patients, because now TrueTear may never see the light of day again. But in any case, back to how this is different. This is the iTEAR 100. This is actually the second generation product that will be on the market hopefully soon. It's more of a connected device. It communicates with an app. We can do the prescription through the app. So there's a lot of kind of connected features that brings it up into 2021. But the key feature is this oscillating tip. A lot of people say, well, isn't it just vibration? Can't I use my toothbrush? And you can try to use your toothbrush and you can probably elicit the effect one time. If you try to do that 30 seconds, every day for a month, it's dangerous. I mean, your bone will be bruised. I've tried it myself actually, and you'll get abrasions and things. I wouldn't recommend it. Can you use other massagers on the market? Maybe. They generally have a much broader base and they're a lower frequency. So this has the right frequency. The tip is specifically designed to stimulate the external nasal nerve, which lies right below the bone and kind of comes out from under the bone and then spreads out over your nose and gives sensation to your nose. Prior to this device, there hasn't been any function ascribed to that nerve other than sensation around your nose. And so we figured out that you could actually use it you could actually stimulate that nerve and elicit the same response as TrueTear was eliciting inside the nose using electrical stimulation. That's kind of the background they mentioned. So again, it's the very specific tip, the edge, the vibration the frequency that it's vibrating at, and then also the fit underneath the bone, and so that it doesn't, so that you're maximizing the force only to that nerve, and there's no collateral damage that you're doing. And of course, we have 6 months, 1 year of data of patients using it up to 1,000 times during those 6 months with no abrasions and no other types of side effects related to the mechanical piece.
I've seen that too in my clinic. I've had great success with it. I've seen it work in patients with dry eye of all types. Those with meibomian gland dysfunction, where it does help stimulate the meibomian gland secretions. I've seen it with mucin deficient dry eye components for the goblet cells, and of course, aqueous deficient patients, including Sjogren's syndrome, KCS. So it seems to work at all three levels. And it's not like a reflex tear. It truly is igniting the basal reflex of tears. So very natural, but it seems to be all three. I've also seen good success in patients who have had nerve issues with dry eye, whether it's neurotrophic forms or others. So given that, and when I certainly have seen it clinically, and when I mentioned it, people are really saying, wow, I didn't know about that. What are the plans for creating awareness and growth for the company? And I know a part of it is just, the process of the next generation, which will come out in a few months or so. But what's the plans post that in terms of awareness?
Yeah, so up to now, there's been really two things that have been slowing us down, I would say. The one is there's a 30-day restriction on the prescription. This is a bit of a surprise to us and became a logistic issue. Most patients are requesting and doctors are prescribing more than a month. And so currently we're sending a new device every month, which obviously is not sustainable. And this issue was compounded a bit by the next issue, which is the pandemic and a lot of the associated supply chain issues. So, we're not Apple. We can't order 1 billion motors. And so they obviously get preference. And so when the pandemic started, a lot of the companies were stockpiling electrical components, and they're just not available. And so now it's kind of lightened up a little bit. We had some workarounds, and so now we have that issue resolved. And we also have our second generation device, which is going to be submitted to FDA very shortly.
So Michael, what's that's interesting about the 30-day utilization. And I guess that makes sense, and based on the study it's proposed and things like that. But has that been, or what have been the biggest challenges to developing a new technology like this and bringing it to the market?
Yeah, I would say first it's financing. There's just so many nuances to it, and that's an area I really had to learn. That's not a natural, kind of innate type of thing. So there's a lot of financing issues that I had to learn. And lots of money doesn't necessarily mean success, but it can increase the odds, I think. In some cases, actually, it could probably decrease the odds as well. But overall, especially in this environment right now, not having a lot of funding can really, it's hard to compete for talent. You don't really have a lot of backups. And so I think financing is difficult, and you really have to choose the right partners. And if I had to give, some advice to anybody, it would be choose the right partners. I mean, that's just kind of life, just in general in life. Both on financing, engineers, consultants, lawyers, everywhere along the line, you really want to choose the right people. So I would say financing is probably the biggest challenge. Just a very close second is regulatory. If you're going for an FDA indication like we did, and I think that's the right way to do it, there's potentially a lot of unknowns. On the one hand, I learned a lot from FDA. A lot of their questions were great. Really helped me make the product better, think about it harder. They came up with a lot of potential issues that I hadn't thought about. And so that part was great. Sometimes that over regulatory piece, the over regulation can actually, be a hindrance too. We ended up having a 30-day label in our product. And the only way to really make this a 30-day device is to have it turn off at 30 days. So it turns off at 30 days. And right now we are sending a new device to patients every month. And so that's obviously a logistic issue, especially in the pandemic. It's been very difficult to manage that. A lot of that will be solved with the new device, which is connected through an app, and we can download prescriptions. And also a lot of the supply chain issues are being resolved now. So I think by the end of the year, we'll be able to really roll this out in a large way and market it and get the word out about it. Back to the regulatory issue. There's a lot of products in the field, in the dry field. This is a challenge as well. There's no label. They claim all kinds of things. They're not really. They're kind of approved. They're not really approved. They're really working the fine line between marketing unlabeled claims and things. And so I think that's been related and a third challenge for us. Sometimes I'm surprised that doctors are recommending a lot of these products because there's not safety data, there's not really good efficacy data, there's not good monitoring for if there are safety issues or not, and a lot of them may be unsafe.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, these are all great learning initiatives that can help anyone who's kind of in this spot, thinking about moving. I'm sure that we've got listeners who are entrepreneurial, who may have an idea, and trying to figure out how to make the leap, to the next level of entrepreneurship with their idea. Any recommendations you might have for them other than, you talked about financing and all these extra things that are so critical, which is so valuable, but is it something you transition to? Is it something you just have to make the leap to, or is it, you think it's probably more variable than that?
For starters, I actually published a paper about 15 years ago when I was working at Stanford called So You Have an Idea, Now What? You can start there. It's got a lot of practical advice and thoughts. I can probably write about 3 or 4 more chapters on that now. So that would be a place to start. I like to say now, and I already mentioned, choose the right partners. But the other thing is, if something looks simple, it's probably hard. Okay, and if it looks hard, then look for something simple because it's probably not the right project. There's so many demands right now, and technology is changing so quickly that if you have a 5 or 10 year horizon for a product, it's likely to be irrelevant in 5 or 10 years. And similar with investors and things, they're going to want more near term type returns, and so. Start with something simple and just expect it to be a lot harder than you think.
Great insights. That's fantastic. Well, maybe we can get a link to that in the show notes or something along those lines. I think that'd be incredibly valuable for so many of the listeners. If there's, one thing that someone in our audience could do to help you at this stage, Mike, what would it be?
Yeah, so I recommend a broad application of iTEAR. Our label, our FDA label, is not limited to any type of specific patient. It's broad. It's essentially create tears in adult patients acutely, and it's over 30 days, as I mentioned before. We have a clinic demo device. It can be used. A lot of doctors are using actually almost like a part of the physical exam to kind of look at tear production potential, let's say, or just to try it in every patient or a lot of patients broadly. As opposed to saying, well, this patient's on 5 different types of treatments and they're not really responding that well. Let's try iTEAR. That's probably not the best place for it. Actually, it's probably much earlier in the paradigm. So think of it on the front end towards artificial tears as potentially even a first line treatment. We have a trial going on right now where we're taking patients that don't have a diagnosis yet of dry eye. They just complain of burning, itching eyes. They think they might have dry eye, and then this is the first line of therapy for them. And and it's amazing actually to me how many patients are in that bucket, how many potential patients are in that bucket in their 20s with really severe meibomian gland disease or aqueous deficiency disease, and they're doing things like pouring water on their eyes, things like that. And so they see our advertisement for the trial. They get into the trial and they start with iTEAR. And so it's potentially more of a first line type of treatment. It's got the right cost structure for that, and also it's easily accessible. And we can do a lot of work online, right? I can train anyone online to do this treatment within a couple minutes. And so it's I think a very easy front end usage. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right away.
Makes sense. And you're absolutely right. I mean, what could be a better beginning than an artificial tear when you can make your own natural tears and stimulate them? I mean, that always is going to win out, and that really is the ideal place to do it. And we know many patients, fail on artificial tears and have to move on. This would be, a much better beginning for them. And it makes a ton of sense. And I think that is kind of a good place for neurostimulation. Well, Mike, thank you for joining us today and sharing your story, your insights, the path you've taken, developing incredibly successful technology, and now even the next phase that may develop of that technology. And what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I would say you can email me anytime. I'm online almost 24 hours a day, iTear100@gmail.com, and I'll respond as soon as possible, within a few hours probably.
You're awesome. Mike, this is fantastic. Great insights. Thanks for sharing so much of your story and so many great pearls in developing a product and going from physician to entrepreneur. Really an excellent interview. And thank you for taking the time to be part of it.
You bet. Thanks. Thanks, Paul. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you for listening, everyone. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the OIS podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our iTunes channel so you get the latest ophthalmology insights. Got a story of your own to tell? Apply to be a guest at OIS.net.